Senate Bill 743. We're rethinking how we build so Californians can drive less. Along with other state initiatives underway, SB 743 aligns with 4 urgent priorities for California: improving our transportation system for everyone, meeting our climate targets, meeting the challenge of the housing crisis, and extending our commitments to protect the environment, while enhancing equity and quality of life for everyone. SB 743 provides a new method for Caltrans and local agencies to analyze the transportation impacts of land development and infrastructure projects. The new method focuses on reducing the need to drive so that cities and towns of all sizes can direct development to local commercial and job centers while supporting existing neighborhoods. We can encourage development that strengthens communities and doesn't force people into long commutes or auto dependence. The governor signed SB 743 into law in 2013. In December 2018, after over 5 years of collaborative, stakeholder-driven development, the new amended California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, Transportation Impact Guidelines were adopted. For the past 2 years, Caltrans, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and the California Air Resources Board have worked to provide information through meetings and webinars to ensure a smooth transition. And SB 743 goes into full effect in summer 2020. California is a global leader in the fight against the devastating effects of climate change. And there's good news. We have met our 2020 climate goals, mainly because of our dramatic progress in switching to renewable energy. The next big challenge is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation to meet our 2030 goals. In California now, about 40% of greenhouse gas emissions come from vehicle tailpipes. And when you factor in refining fossil fuels to run our vehicles, the full impact of transportation sector emissions becomes clear. Transportation causes 50% of California's GHG emissions. Better fuel efficiency, cleaner fuels, and more zero-emission vehicles will reduce GHG emissions, but not quickly enough. Reducing car use is also essential. Before we look at what will be different with SB 743, let's look at what will not change. The state's commitment to SB1's Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Program is firm. It is not changed by SB 743. Projects that reconfigure existing roadways, calm traffic, or enhance safety are not affected. Projects to enhance walking, biking, and taking transit are not affected. And paving projects will continue. The change is that for development projects, SB 743 means public agencies will no longer identify localized traffic congestion as a significant impact on the environment. We will now measure vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. VMT is the amount and length of new vehicle trips generated by a new development project's residents, visitors, shoppers, and employees. Analyzing VMT in relation to proposed development projects takes into account whether a new development is located close to jobs, businesses, and services that enable short trips and travel choices besides driving alone. VMT changes transportation analysis from measuring the impact of a proposed project on drivers to measuring the impact of driving on the community. SB 743 aims to move more people with fewer cars, so we are not stuck in traffic. The main elements are: streamline development projects that address the affordable housing crisis and deliver walkable, livable neighborhoods. Promote developments in locations where there are alternatives to driving alone in cities and towns of all sizes. Change the way new transportation investments are analyzed, focusing on their impact on total driving, and support walking, bicycling, and transit use. Why make this change? Because the ways we have studied development and transportation proposals in the past often resulted in unintended outcomes that are out of step with California's vision for the future. We have been measuring whether a new development would cause traffic delays during rush hour. But rush hour congestion doesn't really tell us if the transportation system is efficiently getting as many people as possible to the places they need to go. If a proposed project would make congestion worse, the sponsor of the project was often required to pay fees, called mitigation. They might have to pay to help add lanes or widen an intersection, for example, which often didn't really ease traffic at the busiest time of day. Projects in areas that were already congested, even if they provided community benefits, new housing, or retail space, often triggered a need for expensive mitigation. Developers would often reduce the number of housing units in a project to reduce anticipated congestion. With required mitigation, sometimes entire housing projects just became too expensive to build. The cost of mitigation often became an incentive to instead build in outlying areas where there was less concern about congestion. And that unintentionally reinforced auto dependency and created longer commutes, which also led to a loss of open space and the costly extension of services. Reducing how much we drive, our dependency on our cars, is a big challenge, but we will share big rewards. By reducing our dependence on cars, we can combat climate change and meet California's state law to reduce GHG emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. We can increase housing. A new tool called SiteCheck shows low VMT areas in green throughout the state. Housing development could be streamlined in those green zones. Housing in central city areas and surroundings generate low VMT. Infill development, including in many suburban communities, also generates low VMT. And small and mid-sized cities and towns that are not bedroom communities generally have low VMT too. Every region and every city in the state, including rural and suburban areas, has green zones. SB743 changes how both development and transportation projects are analyzed. Let's take a closer look at future housing development with SB743. About half of all future housing across the state would not be required to analyze VMT transportation impacts at all. Projects that are in the green zones or within half a mile of transit, those that provide affordable housing or would generate fewer than 110 trips a day, are streamlined. That also means that VMT mitigation would not be required. You do not need to make streets or intersections wider. The project is streamlined. Of the remaining projects, the VMT analysis will require only about 20% of the time and cost as previous analysis. If there's less than a significant impact, no VMT mitigation is needed. If mitigation is needed, developers have many low-cost options, and some can even make the project less expensive. For example, for urban projects, you might reduce parking or add car sharing, or you might add bike and pedestrian facilities. For suburban projects, you might enhance the grid and connectivity, subsidize transit fares, or ensure live workspaces for telecommuting. And for rural projects, add bike and pedestrian trails, workforce housing, or facilitate carpooling. If it's just not possible to mitigate to a less than significant impact, there can be a statement of overriding considerations if a project is valuable to the community and documented benefits are judged to outweigh the negative impact of VMT increases. In addition to streamlined housing, SB 743 offers Californians more benefits. More housing near jobs can reduce transportation costs, which are, on average, second only to housing costs in household budgets. Long commutes to find more affordable housing in ex-urban areas often have disproportionate impacts on lower-income families. Previously, traffic mitigation often led to too wide streets and places where driving is the only way to get around. The character of small and rural towns was often lost. Instead, SB 743 helps preserve small towns and rural character. And spending less time in traffic commuting means we can spend more with our families, participate in more school events and civic engagements, and do the things many of us haven't been able to do because we spend so much time behind the wheel. You can find more information on the Caltrans website at dot.ca.gov. and on the Office of Planning and Research website at opr.ca.gov. Just enter SB 743 in the search bar and click. With SB 743 in place, California is at the forefront of innovative and creative strategies for transportation, increasing housing, protecting our environment, and improving our quality of life.